All right. Welcome back to Talking Topics, where we talk about basically whatever the fuck I want, but usually something very interesting and something that I just want to tell people about. I'm your host, Gooter Spooch, and I'm a giant mushroom. With me today is, as always, the feared water baron of the Detroit Exclusionary Zone, now owner of two Great Lakes out of three, and soon to be conqueror of a small portion of Canada. Is that right, Mike?
Uh, yeah, my troops are moving in on Toronto as we speak.
Oh, so you've gotten way past Winnipeg or whatever. I don't know.
Winnipeg, no, Windsor.
Windsor, there you go. Let's start with a W. See, I never leave my little mushroom forest, so I'm not actually sure about anything about geography. The only thing I know from people is like when they fall into my trap or whatever, and like they're like, "Hey, what is this place? Who are you?" And I just kind of look at them and I'm like, "Well, I'm you," and they say what, and then I eat them and absorb their consciousness. That's how I get all these topics. Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah. Just make sure that this deal stays working, Mike, or I don't know.
Or you're going to fucking turn me into mulch.
No. You'll just become one of us. Speaking of killings in isolated forests throughout the countryside,
Oh, Jesus.
that leads into our segment today. How do I put this? We're going to be talking about some CIA funny business, and by funny business, I mean it's not funny, and by business, I mean it's crimes.
Yeah, that about sums it up.
So there's a little doodad that I've been informed of by Mr. Mike here, named Operation Gladio. Very, very cool name, Mike. Is it about something cool?
What, the name?
Yeah, no, is it named after? Is it named because it's like a cool operation? Like they're like making cyborg like gladiators or something?
No, it's just because it's sword in Italian.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. What's that about?
Well, so cast your mind back, if you will, to a little date and time called 1945.
Okay, so Mussolini, spaghetti, ravioli, linguine. I'm there.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
that's the time traveling Italian
Yeah,
spell.
Linguini
Also,
Mussolini is.
before we keep going, let's be clear: we do recognize Italian people's reputation and identity as POCs, people of Carbonara. Okay, let's keep moving.
Oh, God.
What are you not with the broadcast on this one, Mike?
Boy. All right. Well, moving on.
Yeah. Okay, so we're in 1945. Mussolini, Linguini, cappuccino.
Yeah, he and his mistress are dangling upside down from their posture trainer or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And so now we have two sort of global spheres of influence: the U.S. in one corner and the Soviet Union in the other.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we were reluctant allies in the previous war, we hate each other now.
Nice, yeah. I remember something about this. It's like they're red and we're blue, and there is no purple in existence, so there was no way we could meet peace.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
So basically, NATO, the West in general, but NATO specifically, gets to
And
worry.
for our viewers, what is NATO for less informed viewers?
NATO is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, ostensibly a anti-Soviet military alliance.
Yes, and it was generally portrayed as an anti-World War, but again, alliance as well.
Yeah, it was sort of meant to be not quite an armed wing of like the United Nations, since it's specifically like Western Europe and sort of North America, but
they roll in and they put boots in asses.
Yeah,
for
but
people
they're
who usually don't deserve it.
Yeah, they're generally seen as sort of like a military alliance to counter the Soviets.
Yeah.
And the Soviets counteract NATO with the Warsaw Pact.
Yeah.
So now NATO realizes that if like all of the Soviet tank divisions and all of like the Warsaw Pact countries come like steaming into Western Germany, we basically can't stop them.
Uh-huh.
So one of the proposed solutions for this, and there had been some attempts previously to along this sort of vein of thinking of what are known as stay behind groups.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thinking is you've got like
Wait! I got this. It was like Home Alone, but for countries.
I mean, yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, literally, yeah. The idea being you have like a small sort of guerrilla force operating, behind enemy lines, sabotaging communications and supply routes and that sort of thing. Generally making life hell for whatever sort of, occupying military force there may be.
Oh, I get it. They were like, they saw like the effectiveness of like the French resistance during World War II, and they're trying to
Yeah,
like, emulate it.
because obviously you have like the sort of the nascent U.S. CIA involved now, and a lot of those guys, the early CIA guys, were involved with the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, which was sort of the proto CIA set up to do kind of espionage shit in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and they did a lot of that stuff with like the French resistance and like the Yugoslav resistance, Italian partisans.
Yeah,
But
the
they
stay
immediately,
behinds. Yeah.
but they immediately start to try and do some of this shit with the Soviet Union. They try to do it in like the Ukraine, and it goes terribly.
Is that because like most of the CIA are like extremely white and not Ukrainian?
um, well, that's part of it. It also didn't help that like they the Soviets knew this was happening because they had
Oh,
already infiltrated. They had already like infiltrated some of the like sort of NATO spy circles, and so they knew that this shit was happening. So all of the like Ukrainian Nazis that they flew into sort of fuck shit up got like immediately captured or killed.
oh, okay. All right. I mean, so yeah. So what's this all about then?
So they, instead of that, they realize, all right, so if we can't really stop the Soviets from like storming across into Western Europe, we can at least have a contingency set up to fuck shit up behind their lines within these existing countries. So they come up with Gladio,
Ooh.
which would involve creating a series of stay-behind groups operating within various countries, NATO countries, and even some non-NATO countries.
Christ.
Yes, and we're gonna focus in on Italy in particular because
The namesake of the operation, yeah.
and also because like I think comparatively, um, they're like the most like insane fuckery like got down in Italy compared to like most of the rest of the Gladio member countries.
Yeah, well, when you take anything and you craft it with Italians, you're going to get at least a little bit of messy spaghetti. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Shit gets a little fucked up.
yeah. So basically, they make a deal with the Italian government. We're gonna like essentially fund and equip like essentially sleeper cells of anti-communist like paramilitaries to sort of be able to, we're going to give them training, and they're going to be able to sort of be on beck and call in case like the Reds start kind of steaming over the border essentially.
Yeah, okay.
And so naturally, whenever you put out the call for anti-communists, you naturally end up with a lot of fascists and neo-Nazis.
Ah, so they were like, hey, we're just looking for people who hate communism. Just like anybody. Anybody's welcome to come. Just let us know, and we will give you guns and bombs.
Yeah.
And then they were like, wow!
Yeah, kind of.
You're telling us we could have just asked the US for it this whole time? Wait,
Yeah,
were they recruiting in Italy, or did they get these people from like home and then ship them over to Italy?
Oh no, they were recruiting in Italy. So you had like homegrown Italian.
Oh, so they were like
fascist and
Mussolini.
neo-Nazi groups.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So they would blend in. They know
Yeah.
the culture. See, that's the issue. That's the issue, because when you hire Italians to try not to make trouble with other Italians, there's no way it's not going to become like some spaghetti flinging bullshit where like well, you know what I'm talking about. You've seen The Godfather. But like all the Italians like know each other. Obviously, I don't know how it is in actual Italy, but all the Italians like fucking know each other or whatever. So it's like, I can't do like an Italian accent. Like, have you heard that have you heard that Giovanni is now neo-Nazi? He blow up orphanage very bad. He's a very bad boy. And then you get like the other people across from the into it's like, that's my son. You will not besmirch my son. And now, even though you thought you were just gonna blow up one communist orphanage or whatever, right? Now you have like a permanent Italian blood feud between the I don't know the Mussolinis or whatever, and what's the fucking Italian last name? The Patinos? Is that an Italian last name?
It sounds close enough.
But yeah, like I said, you don't mix Italians with Italians. It's like, man, I need a new cleaning solution. Let me just mix ammonia and bleach. It's just a bad idea. Yeah, so like they have these Italian sleeper neo-Nazis that are like they're like ready to kill some communists or whatever.
Yeah, so they hide.
Kill with kindness, of course.
Of course.
Protests.
Yeah, with they win in the marketplace of ideas.
Yeah, they debate their points and they take over positions in government and make sure that they suppress anti-communist rhetoric. Mm-hmm. Right? That's how it went, right?
Yeah. So basically, they hide like arms caches and shit like all over the country. They do this all over Europe, as we'll discuss a little bit later. Now, naturally, as this is sort of like in its beginning stages, and sort of in like the process of sort of like post World War II Europe, there are a lot of like I guess what you would describe as communists and socialists within various sort of liberated Western countries, France, Italy in particular, who had fought against the Nazi and Mussolini Italian sort of rule for years.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this sort of like general feeling after the war that they'd be able to put down their guns and sort of like get into politics essentially, because when like the entirety of like Western and Central and Eastern Europe is like fucking devastated
by fascism.
Yeah, they're consequently like sort of communist and sort of socialist more generally kind of feelings within the general populace are pretty high.
Well, yeah, because like, you got to think about it, right? If like you had like a bunch of people who like, let's say they weren't involved in politics or whatever, right? And the Nazis take over their place, right? Because obviously the Nazis are not just going to like kill every single person that lives in a country, right? Like they did the Holocaust, obviously, but like there's gonna be a few people who like capitulate. You know what I mean? There's gonna be people who capitulate, and they just sort of like maybe aren't okay with the regime. You know what I mean? But like
but they go along for the sake of not being killed.
Yeah, so then the people who end up fighting are gonna be the people who like diametrically oppose their ideas and shit, right? Like their ideology, which is gonna be your socialists, it's gonna be your communists and shit, right? So when their side wins, right, they're sort of like, how do I put this? Like they're gonna be seen as heroes by the common people, which means that their opinions hold a lot more sway. Now that they aren't like being restricted by like the Nazi thought police or whatever, right? So now they're gonna have like a lot more influence over people's hearts and minds, since they've pretty much already won like the PR like war against the Nazis, because they're literally just not Nazis, you know what I mean? So they win automatically.
I mean,
so like I don't blame them for thinking that like, hey, look, all these people are finally listening to our ideas, and like we don't have to deal with like Nazi dipshits, because all the people who oppose us in politics got murdered because they fought a giant war.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yes, we used to have to deal with this one guy in local politics who was a Nazi sympathizer, but he was hung at the Nuremberg trials. So, you know what I mean? Like, I don't blame them for like thinking that the guns must be put down, because I mean, obviously, you don't want to kill people.
Yeah, but and I think there was a sort of an earnest belief that now we can make things build things better, and
the Build Back Better plan.
Yeah, I realized immediately after I said that.
But yeah, so they're sort of joining politics and stuff.
Yeah, but immediately like the U.S. is sort of like you're just like, oh no.
They're like, we're not Nazis, but we don't like you.
Yeah, and like at least compared to like a lot of like other like third world nations that were sort of like trying to sort of step onto the world stage at this point in the immediate sort of Cold War. Um,
I'm sorry. Before we keep going, was Greece already fucked at this point?
oh, this is in progress, I believe.
Okay, so this is during like quote unquote the fall of Greece, like when shit's going real sideways for them.
Yeah, after it's like, oh yeah, we need to get these communists out of here.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so we immediately think, well, you know, and Europe tends to be a little more socialist anyway, but you know, not too far, not too much. It's sort of like the general feeling that a lot
Yeah,
of
all of their countries were not founded by far right, puritanical Christian fundamentalists.
yeah. So basically, the general sort of line was, we'll give you like a little bit of socialism
You fought a war, now you get a little bit of socialism as a treat.
as a treat. Yes,
They're like, fine, you can be alive without slave wages. That's fine, whatever.
yeah, but naturally, eventually, and like Italy in this sort of period of the Cold War is like particularly fucking like corrupt in its government, which will again sort of we'll circle back to that a little bit later. But naturally, you eventually have like
Well, I'm sorry. One second. For the Italian government, do you think they were corrupt because of like who was installed to power after the fascists were gone? Because like, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Allies held Italy far before the war was over. After going through like the North African campaign up through Sicily and shit, and fucking up all those Italian warships or whatever, if I remember correctly.
yeah, I
So
mean,
is it because like the wrong people were purposefully installed, or are you just saying that their government at that point just so happened to be corrupt?
I can't necessarily say either way with that first part. But I will say that at that point it was because there was literally like a pseudo Illuminati-esque like shadow government operating the country.
Jesus Christ! I'm sorry. It's like get back to what you're saying.
um, so on that note, yeah, corrupt, basically like this sort of like incredibly sort of like conservative like far right shadow government is sort of like pulling the strings a lot of Italian politics, and there's still like currents from this today now even.
Mm-hmm.
But naturally, like the communists and socialists with the sort of Italian government are getting sidelined. So naturally, you have the formation of what's referred to as the Red Brigades.
Yeah, I believe they're listed under belligerents on the Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
There are no sides in Operation Gladio. There is just belligerents.
Yeah. Yeah, and these are sort of more radical kind of Marxist paramilitary groups that sort of form as like specifically in opposition to like the Italian government. And
so they're not communist; they're socialist.
No, some of them are more explicitly communist.
Oh, okay.
But they sort of at least the more armed the actual like armed and violent ones were more specifically like hardline Marxist and like anarchist.
Oh, okay. So the farther left you went, the harder the guns were getting whipped out.
Yeah, generally.
Okay.
But which I mean, at this stage in history, not like an entirely unwarranted position to have.
I mean, yeah, they literally have within a generation a successful communist uprising. So I mean,
Yeah.
fair enough. You know, power to you, bro.
Yeah, and you'll also get like the hard boot of the CIA clamping down basically every non-violent like socialist government like in like South America, Africa, and the Pacific. So
Yeah.
but we'll get to that more of that later. But
so
now
the Red Brigades rise.
yeah, and so you immediately have a beginning sort of clash with both the beginning sort of neo-Nazi groups and the mafia.
So the beginning of the mafia, or this is the full ass mafia?
No, this is the full ass mafia.
Oh, so yeah, because for those of you who aren't aware, your organized crime syndicates are typically going to be far right. And by far right, I mean like really, really far right. If you're wondering about like the Yakuza and shit, they're the exact same way. Like all mobsters are far right fuckheads typically.
Yeah, they typically are more comfortable in a certain status quo that socialism and communism typically tend to upset. So,
Yeah.
but in this sort of beginning in about like the 60s, you get sort of what are known as the years of lead.
Late 1968, apparently.
Yes, which and Italy isn't the only country to have a period in their history called the Years of Lead for basically the same kind of instigating reasons.
Okay. The
Um,
CIA was wiling out, of course.
yeah, and basically this sort of fits into also what is generally called the golden age of terrorism.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because it's a fascinating period of history because basically throughout like the late 60s, through the 70s and even into the early 80s, like you couldn't get on a plane without it getting hijacked.
Yeah, I mean, when did DB Cooper happen, actually?
That was oh god, that was early 70s.
Yeah, so there you go. He was DB Cooper was a first adopter of the golden age of terrorism.
I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, that shit happened all the fucking time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it took brown people,
yeah,
to scare people into actually doing like air reform or whatever. Though.
yeah. Well, I mean, it was typically like I'm taking control of the plane. Fly me to X location, typically Cuba.
Would they like, okay, now that we're here, I need you to, we'll give you fuel to get back, or did the people just get stranded in Cuba?
I mean, it was typically like fly me to Cuba. Now I'm just gonna run off the plane, and then typically they'd get back.
Okay, so they'd have enough.
It depends.
Fuel.
Yeah, it usually end with either like get to place, guy runs off of plane, and then there's maybe some like negotiating, but typically they'll be allowed to leave, or there's like a hostage situation on the tarmac that ends with either like a police raid or a deal being struck, essentially.
Gotcha. So it was like DB Cooper was an innovator in that he jumped off the plane before it landed.
I mean, yeah, he certainly had a novel approach to that, and especially and at least nobody died presumably in that one. So,
but that's America. Fuck America. We're talking about people of Carbonara today.
yes.
Right? So we're in Italia. There's nice rolling hills, the great vineyards, spaghetti, marinara, I make it a meatball, and terrorism.
Yeah, so you basically have this sort of like three-way war between the sort of organized crime of the various Italian mafia elements, the Red Brigades, and the various Italian neo-fascist paramilitary
and I'll put
groups.
some pictures up for the video. But if you guys are wondering where their sympathy lies, you've all played Wolfenstein. Well, have you heard of the far-right terrorist group, the New Order, from Italy?
Yeah.
The National Vanguard.
I think there's literally one called the New Order.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's the New Order they have a giant. They basically have a Nazi flag, but instead of a swastika, they have a giant fucking like Nordic axe or whatever.
Rude.
Because they're like, we're fucking no. That's the National Vanguard, Mike. The New Order has like a giant black
it's a
axe.
hammer.
Or is it?
Oh no, it's a fascist. That's what it is.
Yeah. It's supposed to be like, yes, our fucking Franco, whatever, like fucking Nordic ancestors were so cool and masculine, or whatever the fuck, like the neo-Nazi bullshit, right? And then, like I said, it's just Jesus fucking Christ. The Black Order, they don't have a flag. The Third Position, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that one's more of a sort of a historical reference.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I think fascism was in like its initial beginnings in like Italy and Germany was sort of offered as a third way between sort of monarchism and socialism.
So they're like not only extremely lame but also Nazis.
Yes.
Okay. And if you guys are wondering, we have just as one group listed the Red Brigades, and then a couple others. The front line are the October 2020 or 22 group, PAC, the Workers' Power, Workers' Autonomy.
Yeah, because communists love naming shit. So there's just a shitload of these groups operating.
Yeah, I'll say communists and leftists love naming shit that makes them sound cool as fuck, right? And they also like it when it makes like a good painting. If that makes any sense. Like we can't just be like the workers' force or whatever. We have to be workers' power and workers' autonomy. Like the communists and shit always name their like groups after like propaganda. It's really weird. Whereas Nazis are always just like, oh yeah, Nazi, but spelled different. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah, so you get like this intense period of just like massacres and bombings and kidnappings that just sort of like plague the country.
Yeah. So apparently, it kicks off with a lot of protests from a bunch of students, and then leads into apparently the Piazza Fontana, or yeah, Fontana bombing, which is a monument in like some type of square in Milan that got bombed, that led to some shit getting real fucking crazy. Because the Red Brigades apparently were looking into this like obviously they're not an official government organization, but the Red Brigades were actually looking in to see who caused this bombing. And then it's the government took this as an opportunity. You know, the government that's sponsoring these like far right terrorist groups took this as an opportunity to jail a couple people who are like in the leftist side, like the anarchists and shit. But it was actually apparently found out two neo Nazis were actually responsible for it. So not only did the government get like the ability to jail some of their political enemies in the anarchists, the six are anarchists or whatever, they also got the opportunity to get some brownie points for bringing the actual criminals to justice 3 years after the fact.
Yeah, and sort of the false flag nature of a lot of this we'll get into a little bit later. But
Okay, okay, I'll let you go then. I'll let you go.
yeah, it's also believed. I don't know if there's any. I can't remember if there's any specific evidence, but it's believed that this bombing in particular, once like Gladio started, like the full nature of all
To
this
be
shit
clear, we're
started.
talking about the Fontana bombing, correct?
Yeah, I
Okay.
believe so. Um, Once this stuff started to come out in like the early '90s, I believe it's believed that the explosives used for this bombing may have come from one of the supply caches hidden throughout the country.
Oh Jesus Christ.
Because they did like it, they collected them, they did an inventory of them, and they found that like at least six of them they couldn't locate.
Mm. Oh, because yeah, the the government got fucked because they had to write their shit off for the IRS.
Pretty
Don't you
much.
hate when the IRS exposes your false flag terrorism? Fucking Christ.
But yeah, and then you have a couple sort of notable incidents. One of the like the biggest ones is the kidnapping and assassination of then Italian Prime Minister Aldo Moro by the Red Brigades.
Yeah, they were not happy about getting the short end of the stick when it came to all political matters, because basically, like, at least correct me if I'm wrong. If I had to like sort of assume
Uh,
that like the fascists had somewhat of an ability to sort of gain traction in the government, if not like obviously it's corrupt, so they can't ever really get up there. But they had like sympathizers within their government, whereas all of these far left groups were just like sidelined hard and like cheated out of elections and shit.
yes, except that well, Moro's a bit different in that he was trying to sort of like give the communists more representation within the government.
Oh, okay.
Um, so, and I mean, this sort of plays into some of the sort of conspiratorial thinking around this particular incident, which we'll get to in a little bit.
My man, dude, I if there was a 1960s Italian Alex Jones, that's all I'm saying. My man would have literally lost his fucking mind.
Yes, but so the prime minister is kidnapped and eventually he's killed by the Red Brigades, presumably, basically because no deal could be struck for his release because I believe the kidnappers were requesting the release of several suspected Red Brigade members who were imprisoned.
Oh, is that because of the Fontana bombing, or like was it those people, or was it
I
just
don't think I
general
don't know if it was
people?
those people in particular. I just know that like there were a lot of like suspected,
Yeah,
either
yeah, yeah.
real or suspected Red Brigade members in prison during this time. But and then there was also a an American Army. He was like a major or lieutenant colonel. I'll have to look him up again. But who was also kidnapped, and then I believe he was eventually rescued. by Italian special forces.
Interesting. And when they rescued him, were there any survivors?
Well, I mean, him obviously. I don't know if they just if I think it was Knox. I don't know if they fucking just obliterated all of the Red Brigade guys that kidnapped him.
See, you probably don't know because they probably did. if we had to guess. But yeah, so shit kicks off real hard when Aldo Moro gets killed under suspicious circumstances.
Yeah, and I mean that's sort of like the high point of a lot of this violence is like the fucking prime minister gets killed.
So shit kicks off real fucking hard.
Yeah. And then we have the surfacing of U.S. Army Field Manual 30-31B.
Yeah, and I got that right here, at least the Wikipedia page for it.
Yeah. Now, this is a sort of a purported addendum to the U.S. Army Field Manual 30-31B that it surfaced in 1975. And the key thing to this is that it purports to sort of lay out the groundwork for supporting false flag terror attacks within friendly countries in order to bring those governments down harder on communists.
So basically, you support a bunch of far-right extremists, get them to do a bunch of false flag, pro-communist, like, murder or bombs or whatever, and then the government's like, we got to do something about these communists.
I mean, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Now, the actual like authenticity and provenance of the manual is sort of highly disputed.
Yes, if you give me 1 second. At a 1980 hearing in the House of Representatives, Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, Subcommittee on Oversight, CIA officials testified that the document was singularly effective forgery by the KGB and an example of Soviet covert action.
Yeah, and
basically, so for the viewers, they're trying to say that the CIA says that they didn't make that. Right, it was actually a false flag by the Soviets to try to false flag them in return and make them look bad.
Now, for what it's worth, I tend to believe that this is a fraudulent document.
And why is that?
Well, I mean, just sort of the well, for one thing, I don't know specifically why this sort of information would be in the U.S. Army Field Manual.
Yeah, that is a little weird.
But while this document may be, well, I think it may be fraudulent. I don't think that it's not necessarily incorrect in the thing that the things that it asserts.
So what you're saying? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Because we know that we know for a fact, because we have documentation on this, that the U.S. government tried to do this exact same shit.
Yeah, for example, the Wikipedia page, if you guys are not aware of what happened from the mid-1960s to like the late 1990s even in South America, the Wikipedia page for this U.S. Army Field Manual 30-31B also links to Operation Northwoods, Operation Condor, CIA activities in Nicaragua v. United States, psychological warfare, and U.S. Army and CIA interrogation manuals. And then finally, the United States involvement in regime change.
Yeah.
So basically, even if this document was not true and completely unrelated, Mr. Mike here, noted historian and water baron, is saying that it's kind of like if I told a lie, but I know it, or if I told somebody something I had no evidence for, but I know it's true. If I made up false evidence, it's not like it's not that the evidence isn't telling the truth. It's just not real evidence.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean specifically for Operation Northwoods, this was a plan by the CIA to false flag American targets to justify a war against Cuba.
Yeah, which obviously would have not turned out good.
Yeah, and obviously, like, all of the proposals for it were shot down by Kennedy.
Kennedy was shot down, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's just say that there's reasons that Mr. Kennedy is no longer with us.
Yeah.
Very, very, very obvious reasons. Yes, but talking topics, sowing mistrust in the U.S. government since 2021.
Yeah, so I mean, we already have like that for like we're going to do so it's not as though they have like qualms about like doing false flag terror attacks against like friendly targets when they were planning when they even had like the proposal to do it against themselves. um but Additionally, you have like all the like COINTELPRO shit that like the FBI did to like various sort of civil rights groups all throughout like the 60s and 70s in the US. And then obviously all of the shit that we did in fucking South and Central America, Iraq, Iran, fucking the Indonesia,
I
where
like how
we
you just have to
just
say South and Central America. Then you
well,
get to start naming specific countries.
yeah, well, I mean, like they fucked with that, like that entire continent. So,
Oh,
like,
to be clear, if you guys have ever seen the Netflix show Narcos, every single person in that show is the bad guy. To be clear, the only people who are not the bad guy are the average citizens typically. Because you even get to literally see in Narcos Mexico, the kind of shit the CIA was doing at the time.
oh yeah, I mean that was, I believe they were specifically doing like Iran Contra.
Yeah,
Which,
they even have a character in both of those shows. It's the same character, who very specifically is called CIA Bill, right? And he's a stand-in for every CIA operative that was in the countries at the time. Like they just use him, so when you see him, you know he's the CIA. You get what I mean?
yeah,
Because obviously
and
the CIA people would not be wearing like CIA fucking membership badges or whatever the fuck.
it'd be great if they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It'd just be a lot easier.
They
to
wear
be
like
oh, yeah.
CIA armbands or whatever.
Yeah, they just get the shit from their official merch store.
But yeah, to be clear, if you're wondering about like, well, let's finish up with the years of lead. We'll finish up with the years of lead. What made this conflict come to a close, Mike? After shit got real fucked.
Well, you just sort of had like a general thaw, basically towards like the end of the Cold War because the Soviet Union collapsed, and like I think you just sort of had like a kind of a sputtering of confidence within a lot of like left wing groups. Plus, I mean, arguably, they had sort of been ground down to such a degree that like, and I think there were some like quote unquote peace deals made essentially.
Yes. So if we're talking about timelines for those who are interested, so Aldo Moro was kidnapped in 1978, about mid 1978 in March, right? And if you're looking specifically at the Wikipedia page, so Aldo Moro gets kidnapped, right? And then you look at the other shit that happened in 1979, right? The year after Aldo Moro shit really kicked off. It was the year with the most assassinations, with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 assassinations, right? Of various people getting murdered. And then the next year, the only header in the next year is more assassinations with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 15, about 14. No, sorry, I can't count. 12 to 13. It's a lot of assassinations. And then finally, we get to one of the, at least from what the articles say, not false flag bombings, where a far-right group named the Nuclear Armati Revolutionis, whatever, the NAR, one of the far-right military groups, right, paramilitaries, they killed 85 people and wounded more than 200 in Bologna. And this is when seemingly a lot of these far-right people just started getting absolutely fucking battered and butt fucking smashed because, you know, once the government has lost control of their like far-right assets and they're no longer just killing communists, that means it's time to start murdering them. So right after that, it's just a series of, in 1981 all the way up until 1988, there's just a bunch more murders and then a train bombing. And then by the time we hit the 1990s, there was a bits of small, like, violence here and there where basically, like, some of these, some people, in government are still being attacked by Red Brigade people. But people, the areas have mostly been, like all these groups have mostly been, like, murdering each other to death.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of them like fled to other countries because for fear of like their own like impending demise too, and so a lot of them were in exile and like I think a lot of the like Red Brigade members went to like France and
France, Brazil, and Nicaragua.
Yeah, and then I think a lot of the fascist ones like fled to Francoist Spain.
Yes. So, for example, the reason that a lot of them led to France is because of the Mitterrand doctrine, basically established by a socialist in the French, in the socialist French president, because apparently France was doing okay at this point. Um, said that any far left terrorist organizations who fled to France from Italy who didn't do any active, actual, and bloody terrorism, so as long as they didn't literally kill people, right, and they just like broke power lines or whatever the fuck they were doing, right, would receive asylum with no extradition to Italy, and they'd be given eventual integration into French society as citizens. So generally, France was willing to give these like socialist people, like these socialists and communist people, a chance to reform over in France, at least to stop their violence. And maybe then, if they took out all the socialist people and gave them what they wanted in the French government, there wouldn't be so much violence in Italy.
Yeah.
And that basically ended the ability to leave, and all the extreme amounts of leaders being dead, is what ended the Years of Lead. Not any specific thing done by governments that weren't France.
Yeah.
But then that leads directly into the 80s and Nicaragua, South America, Central America, and all that bullshit. Like the CIA basically using Nicaragua as like their landing strip and like sending planes. But then the Nicaraguan president or dictator, I don't remember what his status was. I don't know if he was elected. Ended up like siding with communists because he wanted more money.
Well, the communists like effectively took over the government at that point.
Yeah, but he was being sympathetic to like he was basically like using them to make like profit.
Oh yeah, sure.
And then he got GG'd. Really, really, really hard. Well, who is that? Who was that guy? It was a very specific guy. There's tons of pictures of him on like CIA tarmacs and shit.
Oh, I don't remember.
What is his name? Okay, the Nicaragua Wikipedia page is not going to tell me. But in any case, so another great example of like these, at least that I know of, and if you want to see this in action of how the CIA was doing and this sort of like false flagging shit, it's not an example of the false flagging as much, but if you, like I said, if you watch Narcos, you get to see one of the infamous far-right terrorist death squads from Colombia in the 80s called the Castaños. I don't remember what their actual thing they made, but it was led by the two Castaños brothers. The United Self-Defense Forces of Colombia, and eventually they were in the fucking Medellin cartel. And when they say self-defense forces, that means that they were paramilitary dipshits. Pretty much. If that makes any sense.
Oof, yeah, that's a whole story. Yeah, actually, fun bit of history. They basically, Colombia's been in like, I think like the longest civil war, because they were fighting, I believe it was FARC, the communist revolutionary group of that same time period, and I think they just signed like a peace treaty a couple of years ago.
Fun fact: those the people that attacked the Palace of Justice?
Yes.
Yeah. So, fun fact: you can see those people as well in Narcos. If you ever want to know about the fuck shit the U.S. government was doing and how the Cold War was outside of America, there you go.
Watch the documentary Narcos.
Well, I mean, obviously it's very dramatized, but and it's obviously sympathetic towards the U.S. in pretty much all aspects, at least in my opinion. Though it might just be because they had a U.S. production company, if I remember correctly. I do.
Yeah, I mean, because it focuses on centers around U.S. characters.
The DEA, not necessarily like this fuck shit the CIA was doing at the time.
Yeah.
But it is a great example of like if you want to watch an entertaining show that sort of talks about it. It's like going to watch X-Men to learn about the Tulsa Race Massacre. It's not like...
Wait, what?
Did you not know about that?
That was Watchmen.
Oh, Watchmen, my bad. There's a men in the name or whatever. My bad. It's like watching Watchmen to learn about the Tulsa Race. Damn, imagine like Deadpool at the Tulsa Race Massacre. Fucking Christ. I'm so sorry. But it's like watching Watchmen to learn about the Tulsa Race Massacre. It's just a thing that happens in the show that you can learn about. And it's also on Netflix, so it's easy to get people to learn about. But like I said, like the Castaños are a great example of these far right death squads that are just straight up like, to use an insensitive term, raffle stomping communists in the jungle because the communist people were just trying to like live, and they may or may not have been sheltering communist guerrilla fighters. But the right-wing death squads do not care, and they would just murder all the people, burn their villages down, and leave.
Yeah, and that's sort of.
And when I say all the people, I even if there was no like evidence of collusion with far left extremists, they would still be murdered.
Oh yeah, no. I believe it was. I can't remember. I think it was Guatemala, maybe. Yeah, they started targeting a specific native. I think it was like a subgroup of Mayan ethnic group, just because they might have left-wing sympathies, and they just started like genociding these people.
Yeah. If you guys are wondering why like South America's so fucked, if you guys are talking about like Vuvuzela, I guess I'm doing that. If you guys are talking about Venezuela, right, and why shit's so fucked down there, there's like an active debate nowadays about like, well, I say active debate, but I mean, in fucking 30 to 40 years, we'll find out probably. Who knows? We'll find out probably which side the U.S. was backing. In the Venezuelan sort of like, what would you call that? Like governmental dispute?
Oh, that whole shit last year?
Yeah, who would be the inheritor? It was what is it, Nicolas Maduro, and then
he's the current is president, I think. I don't know. He's like president or prime minister.
It was like the PM, the president like died or whatever or some shit.
Yeah.
And then the PM was saying that I should be the one, but then the general of like the army was saying that basically like that he should be taking over because there's a chance that the country is being threatened by outside forces. If I remember correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if you kept up with this super well.
Yeah, I think
so basically the government like martial lawed it, and the PM had to go into exile not exile, but he had to go into hiding, I should say. Sorry, you were saying something?
Yeah, so like so Hugo Chavez died. Was it 2013 or something? And then Nicolas Maduro.
No, Mike. He's still around. He quote unquote died because you forgot he did get to.
Oh right, he
to rig the 2020 election.
Yeah, that's right. He rigged the 2020 election.
So he's quote unquote dead. Yeah, his ghost actually smeared his ectoplasm inside of all the voting machines so that Trump lost.
Yes. So then I believe Maduro. I think he was like selected as the successor, but then I forget what the guy's name is. Yao Galart.
Let me look. You can keep talking.
Somebody else. But so he essentially, this guy positioned himself as a leader of the sort of a opposition to Maduro, and fled the country and has been sort of like hobnobbing with like the U.S. and like other Western European countries as sort of like the ostensibly legitimate, leader of Venezuela, even though he hasn't been elected.
Yeah, definitely. He was basically just saying like, oh yeah, I was like Hugo's second in command or whatever, so me.
Yeah, and then there was that whole fucking Silver Corps attempted like coup.
Guaido. Juan Guaido. Yeah. Since 2019, it's been disputed. So basically, the idea is that like the reason the U.S. is sheltering him is because it was a failed ploy to use Guaido to basically quote unquote like puppet government Venezuela because of their left-wing government's style.
Yeah,
that's alleged. That is all quote unquote alleged. Big star there. It's alleged, and if it isn't, I'm joking.
Yeah, and I mean like because Guaido is also
CA,
like
please.
a socialist.
Yeah, but like. Mike.
Yeah, but like I think the hope is that he's going to like denationalize.
He's going to privatize everything, so the U.S. can now treat Venezuela as like one of their imperialist colonies to basically get a shit ton of really cheap oil across the Gulf.
Yeah.
Though to be fair, they'd have to bring it around Cuba. Well, actually, they don't have to. Cuba's being fucked with.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't have to. Never mind. Cuba. The U.S. basically threatens to explode and sink Cuba to the bottom of the ocean until they decide to basically be a puppet state and vacation spot for U.S. citizens.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, if you guys don't know, Cuba's getting fucked insanely hard by the U.S. and has been for an obscenely long time. And there was a vote basically saying that the U.S. should stop its embargoes on Cuba. And every single country in the UN voted for that resolution. The only two countries that did not were the U.S. and, drumroll, Israel. So... Also, I'll let you guys know, if you want to spark far-right dickheads, typically, if they have, if they're on, like, Twitter or Facebook or some shit, and they talk about supporting Israel in their bio, and they're American, they're typically going to be far-right, evangelical Christians, or just stupid. I actually found this dude on Twitter who's, like, it's so weird, because he follows the Israel Defense Force or whatever, the IDF. He follows the IDF on Twitter, and he responds to like every single one of their posts, and he retweets them and shit. And then I was looking through it, I was like, damn, bro, this dude is he a bot? And I found out he's not a bot, Mike. You know how I know?
Oh no, how
do you know? He posted a clip of his Twitch, a Twitch VOD, that has like one view on it, of him like killing a boss or something in World of Warcraft super well. I don't know because the audio is dog shit and the video is in like 480p. I can't tell what the fuck. No, it's like 240p. I can't tell what's happening. So that indicates to me that he's not a bot and he's just really fucking whack. Like, I'm talking like, you know how they post multiple things a day, like the IDF, but they have a person that just posts on their Twitter. This dude responds to everything. Damn. Which is pretty fun. But yeah, do you have any other anti-communist mass killing reports you want to go over or anything like that?
Well, I mean, that's a whole fucking... I mean, yeah, it's just like... So, I guess there's this sort of open-ended question concerning the Red Brigades and whether or not they may have also been sort of... The CIA had also sort of like gotten their hands into them. And was either using them or actively sort of attributing shit that Gladio was doing to them. It's hard to say. I mean, specifically for some of the kidnappings, specifically with Moro, there's like some questions about like, because he was the fucking prime minister and like, the Red Brigades were mostly like, not that they were like inexperienced, but a lot of these guys were like particularly like radical college students.
Yeah, they're literally like organized college students. And if you guys are wondering, like, they didn't number in like, even the biggest Red Brigade groups didn't number in like more than the thousands. Like, we're talking about like the Red Brigades typically had like maybe hundreds of members.
Yeah, so...
And this is the fucking prime minister of Italy. You know what I mean?
So there's some question as to like how they would have pulled this off.
It basically, if you guys are wondering, if you guys remember that far right like terrorist cell that was trying to kidnap the governor.
Oh yeah, of the exclusionary zone.
Yeah, of the exclusionary zone. That was that's like the level of organization we're talking about. Like, this is like the 1970s, so it's like without WhatsApp.
Instigated by the FBI too.
Yeah. See what I mean? So it's like, it's very similar. There's actually, if you guys aren't familiar with the term Al-Qaeda, the real terrorists are typically going to be far right, typically white extremists. There's actually a very fun term that I like called white terror. Are you familiar with the term white terror, Mike?
Yes.
I heard all about this from my professor in college because he did his thesis on the French Revolution. The white terror is the idea that there is sort of like, there's violence, right? And then there's counter-revolutionary violence that occurs against the revolution. And that's typically going to be stuff like Proud Boys and shit like that. Like I said, Al-Qaeda. That they basically, it's terrorism, but not because they're sick of the status quo. It's because they just want to kill the people who are trying to sort of reorganize and get a foot up in the government. Typically, it's going to be white terror is almost always perpetrated by far-right groups to kill anarchists, communists, socialists, anybody that's farther left than, like, lib. Because at least the libs agree with you, you just clown on them when it comes to far-right.
Yeah, and white sort of historically has meant, like, any sort of, like, center-right or even, like, way at the end you have sort of like radical like syncretic fascist groups to like monarchists to like anybody who just sort of has like a stake to lose in sort of the status quo of like socialism, essentially.
Fun fact. So I gotta find the video. Maybe I'll be if I find it, I'll post it in the description. There's actually a really fun video I watched about um extremist groups and the use of the color red. In that, like, people, like, you always think, like, why is it always that, like, a lot of extremist groups are very fond of the color red? And it's because of its, like, identity as the aggression color, the motivation color, the action color, and shit like that, and how it motivates people to move. That's why, if you notice, typically lots of, like, revolutionary or extremist flags are going to be mostly red, with potentially different accents. And that's actually one of the reasons that, at least in my opinion, nowadays you don't see many flags that are red. Mainly because, at least in my opinion, people don't want to be associated with, like, that far left. Typically it's gonna be far left extremism, because the US will then be like, all right, well, we only had one agent there, but it seems like we now have 50. You see what I mean?
Yeah,
So
well,
you
it's
got,
because like
yeah.
well, that's because like in terms of like sort of left wing revolutionary ideology, the red has always sort of symbolized like the spilt blood of like the worker, or the revolutionary.
Yeah.
And I agree that these sort of
Oh, I'm
not
sorry. I'm sorry.
necessarily.
To be clear, the video I was talking about is segregated from, or separated, whatever, from its ideological symbolism.
Yeah.
Like, it's why all extremist groups typically gravitate towards red. But what were you saying?
No, I'm just like, just to finish up. Yeah, so even though both use red, I think that like there's a certain, at least like there's a certain ideological
Well,
consistency
the
with
far right
both,
uses
honestly.
red because Nazi.
Yeah.
That's basically it. But yeah, Mike. So the CIA be doing stuff, huh?
Oh yeah.
You got any other things you want to finish up with? Oh, do you have any, like, mixtapes you're dropping in the you're dropping in the
No,
exclusionary zone?
I have nothing to plug.
Oh, okay. Well, if you guys need, you can catch Mike probably sitting on the throne of Canada whenever he finishes all that up.
Yeah, I have to dethrone that fucking woman who's claiming to be the Queen of Canada. So.
Oh shit, damn. I
Yeah,
can't wait for the ultimate WWE brawl where it's what the fuck is his name? Vermin Supreme versus Mike from the Detroit exclusionary zone. You know who Vermin Supreme is, right?
Yeah, I don't want to fight him. He seems like a really cool guy.
Yeah, see, he's gonna defeat you with kindness and diplomacy. He's got charisma 20 million, bro. He's gonna fuck
He's
you
gonna hit
up.
me with that fucking boot on his head.
Yeah. His special move is a stance where he swaps to standing on his head, but only with the boot. In any case, we'll see you all next week when we might, and by might I mean hopefully and probably, have a complete format change. And we'll see you all then. Bye-bye.